What's up, everyone? My name is Taylor Nemechek, and welcome to the first episode of Who's That Saint? And today, we're going to be talking about a great man of the church. Well, actually a doctor of the Catholic Church, St. Francis de Sales. Alright, so the question today is, who is St. Francis de Sales? Many of you probably know quite a bit about him already, but there might be some of you that don't know very much about him. So St. Francis de Sales was born on August 21st, 1567, to a noble family in the Kingdom of Savoy, near the town of Geneva, Switzerland. And he had this desire from a young age to serve God and become a priest one day. But his family, especially his dad, had other plans for him. His dad wanted him to go into law, so what did St. Francis do? He hid these desires and continued into schooling like his dad wanted him to do. In 1580, he attended the University of Paris, and at the age of 24, he received his doctorate in law from the University of Padua. But all the while, he still had this desire within him to follow and serve God in a unique way. And through all this time, being a member of a noble family, to please his father, he took lessons in riding, dancing, and fencing. Many described him as intelligent and handsome, tall, with blue-gray eyes, somewhat reserved and quiet, but pretty much a man you wanted to be around. One day, while St. Francis was out riding, and bear in mind, he's a good horseback rider, he fell 3 times within that day, and during that time, of course, you had a sword in your scabbard on your side if you were a gentleman. And so each time when he fell, the sword fell out of the scabbard, and when they landed on the ground, the sword and scabbard formed a Christian cross on the ground. And, I mean, it's pretty straightforward calling by God, I would say. And so, after several disagreements with his father, quite a bit of arguing, he finally was able to follow his passion, and he was ordained a priest of the Diocese of Geneva in 1593. Now, we also have to bear in mind what kind of time frame we're talking about here. We're in 1593 when he was ordained a priest, and if we think back to early 1500s, we have Martin Luther rising up against the Catholic Church with his 95 Thesis, and therefore the rise of the Lutheran Church. And then we also have the Calvinists coming in at this time. So St. Francis was really going up against some challenging times. And him being a young priest, he lives around a Calvinist area where approximately 60,000 Calvinists or so lived. And so he had this urge to go into this Calvinist area and, try and bring back as many of the Calvinists as he possibly could. So he trudged around for 3 years through the countryside. And, of course, he's trying to bring people back to the church, so he's not really a welcome guest, per se. So he had doors slammed in his face, rocks thrown at him, pretty much just about anything to keep him away. And, in the winter months, his feet would get so cold while he was walking through the countryside that they would just start to bleed in the snow. So it was a very tough 3 years for St. Francis. Through all these hardships, St. Francis still did not let up, but no one would open the doors for him. So what does he do? He writes out these pamphlets with the true Catholic doctrine written on them, and he would slide them under the doors of these Calvinist homes so that the true Catholic doctrine would reach the people. But still the doors would not open, and he had no way to contact the people. And so what does he do? He goes to the kids. He hangs out with them and just shows them this joyful presence. Plays games, maybe some sports, and it's just this example, this model of love and care for these kids. And the parents of the kids start to notice this and all that St. Francis is doing for the kids. So slowly the parents kind of open up to St. Francis a little, and they started to listen to him and what he had to say. So after 3 years' time, when he finally comes home, it's believed that he had converted approximately 40,000 Calvinists back to the Catholic Church. And in 1602, St. Francis was ordained bishop for the Diocese of Geneva, But funny story, he only actually stepped foot into the city of Geneva twice during his time as bishop. And then in 1604, he sees this woman listening to one of his sermons. This woman went by the name of Jane, and he had actually seen her in a dream. And so the two, over the years, became really good friends, and they were striving to become saints. They were striving for sanctity and sainthood together. This is kind of really where Francis began his ministry as a spiritual director. After years of this friendship, in 1610, he decided to form a new religious order, and it was called the Order of the Visitation. Clearly, St. Francis was a very busy man, and he was always overworked and often became ill because of it. A lot of his time was spent preaching or visiting or spiritual direction. He even catechized to a deaf man so that this man could receive First Communion. And he did most of his spiritual direction through letters, believe it or not. And at times he would have over 50 letters waiting for his reply. So I'd say that's pretty good testament to how patient and resolved this man was. Now, what was significant about the spiritual direction of St. Francis was that he spent a lot of his time in the direction of the lay people. Now, to us, this might be something that doesn't seem very odd, but this is also during a time where it was kind of a common belief that achieving real holiness was something that was reserved mainly for those in the religious life and the clergy. But St. Francis thought otherwise. He had this firm belief that every Christian was called to holiness and sanctity. And this is really what set the grounds for the Second Vatican Council's universal call to holiness. And in 1608, he wrote a book called The Introduction to the Devout Life. And it was an instant success, and it's his most famous book. I actually have it right here. I'm not all the way through it, but I absolutely love it. It's really written well. It started out as a bunch of letters, but then so many people came to him wanting him to write it as a book that he finally just put it into book form. And it's written for the lay people and how in their everyday lives they would be able to achieve holiness. And to St. Francis, the worst sin was to judge people or gossip about them. Sound kind of familiar? Sounds like some St. Mother Teresa. If you judge people, you have no time to love them. In his old age, Francis just wanted to retire as a hermit and, be able to have some time to relax. But he was too needed of a person for that. And this included the Pope of the time, a princess, and even King Louis VIII, the King of France. Over time, Francis's overworked body finally succumbed, and he died on December 28, 1622, at the age of 55. His last words of advice were given to a nun, and the word was humility. He was beatified on January 8, 1661, by Pope Alexander VII, and then 4 years later, on April 19, 1665, he was canonized as a saint, also by Pope Alexander VII. His feast day is January 24th, and he is the patron saint of Catholic writers, the Catholic press, the deaf, journalists, and adult education. So that's a little bit more on who is St. Francis de Sales. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned something about St. Francis that you didn't already know. Make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to see more videos like this. And be sure to comment below if you have any saints that you would like to show up on Who's That Saint. Over the next few weeks, I will be putting on some meditations from St. Francis's book of The Introduction to the Devout Life, so make sure to stay tuned for those, and be sure to stick around for the weekly Who's That Saint. See you guys next time. God bless.